Welcome to Reading Between the Reels. I'm Craig Dickinson.
And I'm Matt Leader. Today on the show, we are talking about Independence Day, one of the kind of big blockbuster summer movies of the 90s.
Yeah, what's fun is, we kind of thought of doing a summer movie series, and that didn't quite work out as far as the timing to do all that. But there's really is kind of a common thread running through these last few episodes. Jaws being what it is, and it's an amazing film, and it's kind of man versus nature. And then Alien has a lot of those same notes. And then we kind of moved to another Alien movie.
Yeah, I thought about that too.
And there are some things I'll get to later that I'm like, yeah, that's definitely kind of reminiscent of some things we saw in our last film. So it's kind of fun seeing some of those similar beats.
Yeah, totally. And I thought about that too, actually, how there is, our last episode was Alien, and then with this episode is all about aliens again. And they feel like totally different movies, but they still have some similar beats, like you were saying. And it does kind of feel like we're on a little bit of a creature feature kick right now. But that's just kind of the way it worked out.
Yep. So, Matt, what are your overall thoughts on Independence Day?
So my overall thoughts could be basically summarized in the fact that the dog lives. So the movie's excellent.
Yes, I had that later on as well. So.
My wife wanted me to say that. So
yeah.
It's directed by Roland Emmerich, and the screenplay is by him as well, along with Dean Devlin. And I have to say that overall, I'm a pretty big Roland Emmerich fan. I love the big, bombastic, over-the-top disaster movies. He also made Day After Tomorrow, 2012, and both of those, along with this one, have the over-the-top explosions everywhere. It feels very action and cheese and kind of one-liners all over the place. Another one that he made was Godzilla, the late 90s Godzilla, which was a movie that I grew up watching. Absolutely love that film and still think it holds up, although it's still incredibly cheesy. And that's I think the best thing that I can say about this film is it's just really fun. It has one of the best leadership speeches in any film. Even though I've seen this movie tons of times, and I know the speech pretty well, still sends chills down my spine when I hear the speech by the president at the very end. What's really interesting to me overall is that, to be honest, I don't really remember a lot of the character names. And usually that's a really, really bad sign for me because I tend to like good character work. And what I've kind of noticed is that in spite of that, the actual characterization is pretty decent. And I actually, just by happenstance, rewatched Day After Tomorrow yesterday. Like I said, another Roland Emmerich film. And it feels very similar, kind of thematically and tone-wise. If movies have a soul, the two movies share that soul. It has almost kind of an ensemble cast. Both films, and there's main characters who we follow for large portions of it, but even the kind of B and C characters still have some life and some pathos to them. And I think that's what really gets me about these films is that they show these disasters and it shows people at their very worst, as in the world is literally falling apart around them. And it gives an opportunity to see how these people would react. And they react in such human ways that it's easy to connect with them. And so I may not have a name for the Will Smith character, but it's like I connect with him. I sympathize with him. And I think that's good storytelling. That's just a little different than what you might see, in a lot of stories that kind of follow 1, 2, 3 main characters. Who we really get to know. What are your thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, no, I like a lot of what you said, and I hadn't quite had that crystallized in my mind quite the same way until you said it. And that the draw for this movie, I remember, was the special effects, right?
Absolutely.
Just the shots of the White House being destroyed, and all the landmarks being destroyed, and it has great special effects, which I think hold up pretty well for the most part. But really, it is the fact that it has so many great characters that we really do empathize with that makes this movie kind of hold up. Everybody remembers Will Smith's character, even if they can't remember what his name is. Everybody remembers Randy Quaid's character, and there's somebody for everybody to identify with in this film. And I think that even though, like you said, even though we don't know the character names, they're so well drawn, and their reactions feel, for the most part, pretty realistic. And it's interesting that it's a big blockbuster, but really it's kind of a character piece at the same time. And I think it straddles the line pretty well between those two things.
It's got a lot of heart.
Definitely. And I agree that the speech, I had that later when we got to performance. I had to write the entire thing down because it's so good. And it does. It gives you chills, even though I've seen this movie, 20 plus times.
I just think that, that speech right there it's such a thesis statement for the theme of the film, which is that, no matter who you are, what, walk of life you come from, that you are human. And this kind of alien invasion is almost like a scenario where it's like, okay, when the chips are down and when it really matters, will humanity come together? And they do, right? And they kind of coalesce. And there's this kind of U.S. centric. I mean, the movie is U.S. centric, but it does sprinkle in other countries and stuff. And that's not the movie that was made. I would love to see kind of a multinational film. But what it does show is that people are working together. And I love that idea. I love that sentiment. And I think it's a very inspirational film. And so it's like, yeah, there's tons of explosions and there's aliens and stuff, but it's so hope-filled at the end, which is the exact opposite of Alien in sense of tone. Right. Obviously, Ripley escapes it right at the end in Alien, and it's a quote unquote happy ending. But Alien is so dark and so filled with unknowns and filled with terror, and this film is kind of the opposite in a lot of ways. Yeah. I mean, we have a scene where they go to Area 51 and they dissect the alien on the surgery table, and we learn all about him and stuff. And so for me, that's kind of what I meant by, we have this kind of creature feature thing, but they're very different films. We got these two films about aliens. One is all about the unknown. There's this sense for me of cosmic horror, of things that are beyond human, beyond humanity. This ancient civilization that was somehow, it's like the Roman Empire that fell. And you get the Dark Ages, and people come and find the Roman ruins, are like, these are amazing. What kind of civilization built this, and where to go? And there's a sort of sense of dread that comes from that. Whereas Independence Day is, yeah, we're gonna go kick some alien butt,
yeah.
And it's a roller coaster, right? Rather than a House of Mirrors horror that Alien is.
Yeah. Just a couple, I had some of my own thoughts, but I want to respond to some of yours too. There was a great quote I got. You talked about the American centrist part of this, which it undeniably is. There's that great scene at the end. They're like, "What's the Americans? Well, it's about time. Like, what are they going to do? Right? We've just been sitting on our hands waiting for the Americans. Yeah. Which is fine. I think it's fun. It was rousing, and I don't know how well it played in other countries. It played great, in the U.S. The film made over $800 million, in the late 90s. So it did pretty well. But there was a quote that I read that I really liked about the music. And I think the music's great in this film. Mm-hmm. It's by a guy named David Arnold, who's a frequent collaborator with Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, and also did some Bond films. But the quote from Dean Devlin, he says, and David Arnold is from England. He says, "You can leave it up to a Brit to write some of the most rousing and patriotic music in the history of American cinema."
That's
and it is. Yeah, isn't that great? And it is, especially I think of the scene where Randy Quaid is flying his crop duster, and it's just this soaring America's flying over the fields, and it's beautiful, and it makes you feel good, and it makes you feel proud of your country. And it's kind of interesting that it's by a guy who's not from America, but it works. I think it's an excellent job, kind of building that atmosphere. We talk about world building, and kind of like there's something to fight for, that you're kind of getting that the setup at the beginning of the film. I did feel this time another thing I thought was, and I mean I'm not privy to the inner sanctum of American politics, but it feels like it would be a realistic take on how you would handle an alien invasion. Mm-hmm. It felt like they did a good job of kind of letting us behind the curtain of here's the steps that we would take. And I love that they have, there's SETI out in the desert. They get the signal, and then it passes up the chain to the military, and then it ends up in the White House. But I found it was hilarious that the White House got a bunch of info on the aliens coming into the atmosphere from the news.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe you guys would have a little bit better intel, hopefully. And there's a lot of news as exposition in this film, and that's just kind of, one of the crutches that they use just to kind of explain certain things. But I thought, for the most part, the movie is self-aware enough to know how absurd the plot is, but kind of leans into that. Mm-hmm. And so it works. But there are a few moments kind of tonally that just kind of make me laugh. The thing at the beginning where, it's just too much politics. And then, when I think it's just his chief of staff, I think, is talking to the president.
Pretty sure.
Yeah. And then, the thing about Jeff Goldblum, my God in heaven, when he's like, someone's throwing away an aluminum can. It's like they try to get a little preachy in spots, but fortunately, those things are few and far between. But it's a fun movie. It knows that it's silly. It knows that, basically a guy who works for the cable company is literally the smartest person on the planet. And that's kind of absurd, but it's okay because, Apple computers are compatible with alien technology. And so we can create a virus here on Earth that will, weaken their impenetrable systems.
Yeah. Apple, it just works.
And the slow-mo fire and the fast dog, of course, which was amazing. And then my last big thought was that I really like, before we get into the nitty gritty, was that I love that they have the big lengthy debate about using nukes. Goes on and on for a while. Ultimately, they decide to use them, and then it doesn't work.
Yeah,
I love that. Like it's like a kick in the teeth. You're like, okay, we're going to make the sacrifice. It's for the greater good, and then it doesn't work, and you're just like, oh man, we're in trouble.
Absolutely, and I think that that the idea that the movie is aware of kind of how silly it is part of what makes it fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously. There's plenty of jokes, and it really tries to inject some humor into a very serious situation. But I think that balances it out. I think you need, for an action movie like this, I think you need humor and levity to lighten the mood a little bit. And that's one of my big criticisms of the Snyderverse, is the lack of levity and the lack of joy in the world. And not to get too sidetracked and get off topic, and I don't want to trigger Craig too much, but it's like in the Snyderverse, that lack of joy, it kind of makes you like, why is this a world that we want to save? Not to be, cynical, but this, there's a lot of joy. There's a lot of love in this movie. There's fathers and sons, husbands and wives, people, children coming together, and you see these people, they want to live because they want to be with each other. And I think that's just a really cool place for the movie to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. And honestly, it reminds me a lot of, and I don't have it in front of me, but what year it came out, but Armageddon, which is one of my wife and I's favorite movie. That is, again, it's very much like we're just sitting back and waiting for America to take care of business. It's very rousingly patriotic, very over the top. And Harry Stamper, that's who Bruce Willis plays, but he's probably the only one I can think of the character names. But I love the actors that are in that film and the way that they're just chewing scenery. Steve Buscemi in that movie is amazing. It's a similar vibe. where you're
Yes.
just having, it's ridiculous. Basically it's the size of Texas. I mean, but it knows that it's ridiculous, and that makes it fun. And I know,
Yeah.
probably both of these movies they didn't do well with critics,
Probably not.
but they did very well, with the ticket paying audience.
Well, yeah,
And
and
really,
I think
sometimes that's all you want.
yeah, I think there's a difference. I mean, you can have movies that are extremely artistic and well constructed, and they're real like filmmaker movies. Filmmakers appreciate them because they can see what's going on and what went into it. And I also think that there's movies that are just, your popcorn flick where it's like, it's been a long day at work and I want to watch something that takes my mind off things. And that's the same thing with books. I mean, we have literature that is kind of popcorn literature where it's like you're reading a book because you want a little escapism. And there's novels like War and Peace where they are behemoths of the literary world, right? But you probably, I can't speak for everyone, but you probably wouldn't pick up War and Peace after a bad day at work. At least I wouldn't.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's a great point. So I want to talk a little bit about cinematography and what I thought they did really well with this film. First off, I like and it has to be an homage to Star Wars. Was the first time you see the mothership flying over the moon, where it basically fills up half the screen as it flies over. That low angle, very slow moving. You don't actually get to see the entire ship, which is cool. And I think, the sense of scale in this film is handled excellently. It feels like it's just completely overwhelming. Your odds are, I sympathize with you. I'm thinking about Ash from Alien, right? It's over. You don't have a chance, which I thought was amazing. One of the things that I noticed this time is that early in the film, there is a close up on the chessboard when David Levinson, that's Jeff Goldblum's character, and is playing with his father. And what I thought was interesting was ultimately it's happening as the ships are getting into place, and it's foreshadowing because he brings up that analogy later in the film. And I was like, oh, that's what they were doing. There's a reason that all you're seeing is this giant chessboard filling the screen, which you wouldn't think you'd see in a sci-fi film, but it served, I thought, a really interesting purpose here.
that's fantastic. I have never put that together, but I think that's absolutely what they were doing. That's a perfect example of a little bit of prop work and cinematography that kind of adds to the story that's being told.
Yeah, even a blind squirrel finds a nut now and again. But I thought, oh my gosh, it just kind of hit me. This time.
Yeah.
I've seen it many times, and so I was able to kind of, and I know you probably feel the same way about this film, that you can kind of, you don't have to worry about the plot, so you can just kind of just let it kind of gloss over you a little bit and just like pull out stuff you've never seen before, because you don't have to pay as close attention to some of the finer, storytelling points.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing that I really liked with the cinematography is, and I've always liked it, is the scene where Will Smith's character, Stephen Hiller, I think, he's reading the paper, and you can just see, like, out of focus, the neighbors on the left and the right hand side, like packing up all their stuff, getting ready to go, and he's oblivious to it. I love that it's out of focus, and then it shows just his face, and it's a lot of shots of just faces. They did this with Jeff Goldblum too, where it's like it's kind of the Jurassic Park acting, right? They're looking at nothing, but the performances in this film, I think, are pretty good, because you believe the terror and the shock in these people's faces.
Absolutely. I think the performances are really, really well done. There's one line pretty early on for Will Smith's character. He walks out to his car, he gets called in, and his girlfriend / wife says something like, you're not as charming as you think you are. And in my mind, I was going, no, he is. He is. And that's kind of across the board, though. Like, all the main characters bring a real charm to the screen. And I think it really comes together. Julius Levinson, who is the character who is Jeff Goldblum's father, I think is amazing. He adds some real humor along with Jeff Goldblum. Those two together are fantastic. Bill Pullman as the president has, like we said earlier, one of the best speeches, inspirational speeches, I think, in film history. But he just pulls off the kind of concerned leader pretty consistently throughout the film. Will Smith is charming up and down, and the general, I think, who's played by Robert Loggia,
Yeah.
sells it really well. And this is kind of what I mean, where it's like, I'm looking down on IMDb and like going down the list, and it's just like every one of these characters, I don't know their name from the movie, but it's like, yeah, I bought that he was a scientist, the crazy scientist in Area 51. It's like I buy that performance. I think it's a lot of fun. For me, it's a little special that a film can have as fun of characters as they have without being able to remember who they are, their names and stuff.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
No, I totally do. I totally agree. And I do want to talk about that one little bit further when we get a little bit further down in the character. I had a few other things, but I don't want to jump the gun just yet. But I agree absolutely with all the actors that you pulled out. With color, with this film, one thing I noticed a lot with them is there's a lot of neon green in this, and I think I'd always noticed it because it's very, it's very prevalent and it's right there. And the people are kind of attracted to it, which I thought was interesting. You get into color theory, right? And green is typically a good color, right? It's typically like soothing and peaceful and tranquil and that kind of stuff. But then I thought, there's the video that we've shared before, and I know we've used it in some of our classes, where in like Disney cartoons, the green is always evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know there's a flip side to it. And I thought that was interesting that you have, there's lots of shots, going with camera work as well, where you have this extreme low angle looking up at the alien spacecraft, and it opens up the laser cannon, right? And the people down, and then there's, it switches to, extreme high angle looking down at the people. And they're looking up at this green light and thinking it's this inviting paradise, and then they're obliterated. And so I think it plays both ways, right? The green is inviting on purpose, but ultimately it's, this evil green. It's poison. You think of envy, right? Because they're coming to take our planet. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of, flip sides to it. It's a very deliberate choice. I mean, they didn't just pick green randomly. And it is kind of an appealing color at first, but then it kind of takes on a different tone after you figure out exactly what these people are about, what these aliens are about.
Sure. I mean, green can be the color of sickness as well.
So we talked about the music a little bit, and I think we both agree that the music in this film is great. Mm-hmm. The instrumental music is great. It does a really good job of building tension in certain points. So you have the great Americana. There's we talked about the speech, and we'll talk about it again. There's this rousing theme that comes after the president finishes that speech. But the one thing always stuck out to me that I always really liked, and actually got me into REM for a short time, was the diegetic use of "It's the End of the World as We Know It" at the beginning. And I'd heard that song a couple times before, and I was like, that's so cool. What a great song. And it's a little on the nose.
It's really on the nose. But
okay, it's a lot. It's a lot on the nose.
But it kind of works because the film itself is a little silly and not taking itself too seriously.
Yeah, the film's a little on the nose. But I thought that was cool. It was just it hit me at the right time. And I really enjoyed that. I was like, I need to get that album. And so I went out and bought that. And then the last thing I want to point out with music was I've always enjoyed, there's a little bit of like Mickey Mousing when Randy Quaid's character stumbles out of the crop duster, and it's kind of played for laughs. Because it's this really big, epic thing with him flying that little tiny airplane, and then even him just falling out of the plane. It's like, you kind of know there's something important with this guy, because it's a little over the top that you have this much attention paid to this one guy. And then it turns out, he's not crazy. He was, kidnapped by aliens. He's telling the truth, which is another thing I loved about this film. With the Area 51 thing, we talked about that a little bit before. I remember first time I saw this film, when they went there, I was like, that came out of nowhere for me. But I was like, that's so cool. What a great connection to make, that, this movie had another layer beneath it. And it was like, there's actually a conspiracy that we can they end up using, ends up being the key to defeating the aliens. And, they didn't have the Area 51 angle in any of the trailers. So, which I think was a great way to kind of hide this twist that you're going to have in your film.
Sure. And for me, this kind of falls into the stories that I really kind of love of these conspiracy theories that prove to be true. I think that there's certain conspiracy theories in real life, Bigfoot, Area 51, that are mostly just fun conspiracies. If someone goes out Bigfoot hunting while they camp with their kids or something, that's cute and fun, And I love this movie, like the National Treasure films with the map on the back of the Declaration, like that kind of stuff. I eat it up. I love it. I think it's just fun. But it also kind of lets you know, like a wink and a nod, like, oh, but this could be true because Area 51 does exist. So guess what? And I just think that's like it's a fun wink and a nod towards the audience. And you see this pop up in a couple of Emmerich's films as well.
Right. You think of, like Stargate with the ancient astronauts, and there are some things like that. But, you mentioned Julius Levinson, Jeff Goldblum's father in this film. He's the one that brings it up too. So it's played for laughs, right? He's like, there were the aliens, and they're like, yeah, whatever. I know that's not true. The president's like, I don't know what you've heard. And then you have that great line. That's not exactly accurate. It's what? And then the movie takes a left turn, which is fun. There's so many great lines in this film. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, you have great performances, you have great actors, memorable actors, and of course, there's great lines in this film. The one from the beginning, the president he's so many great things, other than the speech too. I mean, the speech in and of itself is fantastic, and it might be. And I haven't seen all of his films, but this might be Bill Pullman's best film, in my opinion. I mean, he's been great in some other things too, but he's so great. He's charismatic in this. And I remember at the time, he was so young to be playing the president in a movie. That was not something we had really seen to that point. And so, when he says at the beginning, "I'm not leaving," it was powerful, right? You just to say, you know what? I'm not going to do something that's going to cause panic in the streets. And then he gives a speech, and this is one of my favorite things too. He says, "If you feel compelled to leave these cities, please do so in an orderly fashion." And then there's immediately a jump cut to riots and crash. Smash cut, exactly, which is amazing. And then this time it's a line from someone who's not a big actor, an extra in the film, essentially, on the news, because again we're using the news for storytelling purposes. Says, "Once again, the LAPD is asking Los Angelinos not to fire their guns at the visitor spacecraft. You may inadvertently trigger an interstellar war." Like that right there, that is, in a nutshell, this movie knows what it is.
Yeah.
And just amazing. Did you have any lines that you really liked from this film?
The one that always gets me, other than the speech, is Randy Quaid right at the end. He just bellows with such joy as he's flying up into the belly of the spaceship. "Up yours." I think it's like, "Guess what, boys? I'm back." And he smashes into the ship and it explodes and saves the day. And the performance is fantastic. And it's such a cool climax of the film for me, because you spend roughly the first half of the film, whenever we see Randy Quaid's character, the movie's just taking a dump on him. I mean, his kids don't like him. Yeah. He's a drunk. Nobody believes him.
Gets arrested at one point. And then, he kind of works his way into a fighter jet. And and this is something that it touches on something that I really saw this time in the film. Because I saw the movie a lot growing up. I haven't seen it in years. And there's a class consciousness, I feel, in the film. And it feels like there's commentary, again, on that kind of humanity part, where the hero of the film, the person who saves humanity, is a drunk bum who has his life in shambles. Will Smith's wife, eventual wife, is an exotic dancer. And there's a great line in the film when she meets the first lady, right? Right.
And the first lady asks her, like, what do you do? And she goes, oh, I'm a dancer. And the first lady's eyes light up and she goes, oh, ballet. And then she responds, oh no, exotic dancing. And oh. And it's this like smashing together of the two kind of opposite ends of the social spectrum. The first lady and an exotic dancer. And the first lady says, I'm sorry. And she responds, don't be. It's worth it for my son. And, the heroes of this film, in a lot of ways, are ordinary people. They are people who you might kind of look down on, just walking around in normal society. And I would say that our society nowadays is a bit more tolerant in general of things. And this movie was made almost 30 years ago, is it?
Yeah, 96, so 25
and
years.
so I'm curious what the reaction was to have kind of, the drunk and the exotic dancer being kind of heroes of the film. And of course you got your more traditional heroes as well.
Yeah.
But then, like you mentioned, the cable guy, smartest person in the room.
Yep.
So it's to me, it's like this gathering together of all these different elements of society, and they all come together to work towards this common goal, this common good. And that's such a beautiful idea. And the performances and the lines that they give really just sell that to me and cement that as, the movie, what it's trying to do, besides just entertain us, is to make some comment, no matter how ham-fisted it is, that humans are worthy of dignity, be you a first lady or an exotic dancer. And I think that's just so cool.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's sentiment, and it's really is something. We talked about the speech a lot, but it really it is all about unity. I mean, that speech to round us up, it's not just an American fight anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's for all of us, and we're not fighting against freedom. We're fighting against annihilation. And it's I think unity is absolutely, the theme of this film. And it's kind of like a collective hero's journey for a lot of these people that are, finding,
great point. Yeah.
The will to act and strength they never know they had, courage they never knew they had. But like you said, there's also some very kind of almost stereotypical macho characters in this one as well, like Will Smith's character, and they all kind of blend together. And because I have to go back to some, like the Welcome to Earth scene.
Yes.
I think that might be my favorite line in the film. And I love the way that it happens because, he opens it up the alien spacecraft and he's being super cocky about the whole thing. He's talking trash the whole time. He miraculously survives. And then he's like, he's going to die. And then the thing pops up and there's a little bit of a jump scare. And then he punches it in the face. It's like, okay, that's what we're doing. Welcome to Earth. And it's just like, he's so cool.
Yeah.
And and it's like, yeah, we can do this. Right. Up until that point, it had been very much like, it's just a matter of time until we're wiped out. And then it's like, nope, it's like this, this macho Americana, I don't know, just, standing up to it, not being afraid. And we're going to get this done.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love Will Smith's walk up and all the trash talk on the way to the spaceship as well.
And I was thinking, as much as the rapport between Smith and Goldblum is amazing, and I love it. Like, it still makes me laugh, especially, when they're paired up together at the end, this time without the oops. How have these two actors not been in another movie together? How would they not had, I don't know, just something else? Because it's very, it's like the Odd Couple type of pairing, but their chemistry is great.
Yeah, it really works.
It feels like a missed opportunity that hasn't happened yet. So, somebody put those guys together because I'd watch that. It's fantastic. I mean, I don't know. I thought that was great. I also really like the line when the president's being essentially killed by the alien on the autopsy table. And the guy says, "Is that glass bulletproof?" And the way Adam Baldwin says, "No, sir." It's like, yeah.
And then they blow him away.
And they just blow him away. That's right. That's what we do. But the way he says it, it's just like, It's totally understood.
Oh, it works so well.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, nuke them. It's like, yeah. And then, of course, it doesn't work. But, it has this, it plays really well with like the lows and the highs. Like it's, always darkest before the dawn. That they play that angle very, very well in this film. It's like you said earlier, it's a roller coaster. And it works. It's still fun. I've seen this movie so many times and I know what's going to happen. And I still enjoy those moments of the highs and the lows and the jump scares and the cool lines and all that stuff. So,
oh yeah, the little speech about the Black Knights when Will Smith and the other fighter pilots are first going to attack and they launch their missiles, and again all that bravado, and then it doesn't work and it all goes belly up, and the Will Smith's pilot friend, he dies, and and I thinking about it more, talking with you, it is such an interesting juxtaposition. I mean, this movie, I feel like, is begging for a real deep dive into the analysis, because you do have that true Americana bravado, John Wayne hightailing it across the desert kind of feeling, alongside this kind of narrative of unity. And I don't know how well those two things work together in the same. I mean, the movie is fun as hell, so it's not that it doesn't work, but it does kind of clash a little bit with each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, though there are some tonal things, like I mentioned before, where it gets a little bit preachy on environmental things. I'm just going to mess up the planet so they don't want it, and there's some politics things earlier. It's doing a lot of things, and they don't all land, but the vast majority of them do. And if the goal is to be fun and to let you have a good time at the movies, then it nails that 100%.
Yeah.
I had a question for you. The alien design. I really like the alien exosuits. I thought those were great and very much reminiscent of, the xenomorph from the last film that we did.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably fairly intentionally. What did you think about the little alien that's inside? What do you think about the design of that one?
I thought it was fine. I thought it worked. It's hard for me to get a little distance from the movie because this is a movie that I kind of grew up watching and saw many times when I was younger and loved, kind of the action and stuff. And so it's so familiar to me that it almost doesn't even register.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, the kind of telepathic abilities that they have.
Sure.
Which is a little different. The creepiest scene in the film is when you are watching them cut the alien open and it attacks all the doctors and stuff, and then the president walks down there and it slams the head doctor up against the glass.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden. I think the design is fine. I mean, I hate to say it's kind of unremarkable because I feel like it borrows from what some, classic, the big glassy eyes, the big head, small body, kind of Area 51 alien, with a more organic twist to it, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. The reason I ask is, there's a bunch of stuff in this film that very much pegs it as a 90s film.
Mm.
Between, the TV sets and the huge cell phones and the computers and those kind of things. And so that got me thinking about, I like this movie because I liked this movie in 96,
mm-hmm.
And it has that nostalgia with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of had the thought of, how would a new viewer who hadn't seen this film, how would they feel? Would it's, does it work on that level? And then I just, I realized that I've showed this film to my kids and they love it.
Yeah.
And they have, because it's a fun film and they're not caught up in, what the giant cell phone looks like or what kind of, dial-ups we have for internet or, all those kind of things. They don't care. They want to see the aliens. They want to see things get blowed up, and the characters and the lines are amazing. So I think I do think it translates. It's fun to watch things like that where you go, wow, that is outdated, but I don't care. It's a period piece. This is what would happen in 96. Just go with it. One just random fun fact I found about the setting was that they didn't film in the White House because you can't do that. But the set has been used in another couple movies. It was built for The American President, the Aaron Sorkin written film, which we may do at some point, and was also used for the movie Nixon. So that's kind of cool that that at least somebody was recycling. So there you go. So it's using
Jeff Goldblum would love it.
That's right. They're consistent all the way through. And one thing I had this time is the alien fighters, their little spacecrafts, and those things are not very aerodynamic. But of course, we're not supposed to understand their technology anyway. So
I feel like we can forgive that one for it being alien tech.
They kind of look like oven mitts to me a little bit, or like crab claws, maybe. I don't know.
I can see that a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe the designer had crab right before he designed it. So.
I've heard that's what it was with like the Millennium Falcon. So maybe that's true. Like they had a hamburger, and I don't know. So characters, I think we've talked about just about everybody. I mean, Will Smith is amazing. I remember when I first saw the trailer for Men in Black, which is, I believe, his next film. I think that came out in '97, and it has the spaceship crashes and step out of your vehicle, put your hands on your head, and it's like he's playing the same guy. I'm so excited because I'd love that. Essentially, he's Will Smith kind of playing Will Smith, but
yeah,
he's great in it. Bill Pullman's amazing. Jeff Goldblum. I did want to mention Mary McDonnell is the first lady when she dies. We mentioned her earlier in her interactions with Will Smith's girlfriend, soon to be wife, was kind of a big move. I thought kind of a bold, gravitas inducing move that, there's actual stakes in this. You also had Harry Connick Jr.'s character die. Which, yeah, I mean, this movie works emotionally because we could all die. You just saw some people that you care about. They'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And I remember that being, wow, that's kind of an interesting choice. That's big.
Well, and it comes back in, later on, plot-wise, because the sleazy Secretary of Defense basically accuses the president of being too emotional when his wife dies.
Yep.
So it's like it's not even just used for gravitas and kind of raising the stakes, although it does, but it also plays an important part in that little character moment right there. And one quick random thing that I've kind of noticed is there's a bunch of little performance things that I notice in these Emmerich films. I mentioned that I watched The Day After Tomorrow yesterday, the day before, and noticed the same thing where there's just these little character moments. One thing that stood out to me was when the aliens first attack the military base. I think it's right after the Air Force tries to attack and fails to attack the big ship. The commander of the Air Force base is sitting there with a cigar in his mouth. And when he realizes that the aliens are coming to attack the base, he kind of just lets the cigar fall. And it's those little moments right there. Jeff Goldblum looking for ice and being like, there's no ice here. For me, I kind of think of those things as fat. So when you're cooking to add flavor, you all often cook with some kind of fat. And it's not necessary. Like the fat isn't going to give you more nutrients necessarily, right? It's not life-sustaining, but it adds flavor to it. And you can have a movie, have all the basic characterization and the plot points and everything, but there are some movies that have just the right amount of fat that add just a little bit of flavor, a little bit of sizzle to them. And I think that this movie has that flavor. And it's the one-liners, it's the little moments of acting that the characters have. Just Goldblum failing to find ice. Like, it's such a frustrating moment. As someone who's still using ice trays, I feel his pain. And so it's like, it's that empathy, it's that connection. And that would be something that could so easily be cut because it's not necessary to the plot of the film. It's not necessary to the characterization, but it adds just a little bit of real world verisimilitude to the film that it helps sell the magic of the movie.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I will not try and add to that. So, and yeah, ice cube trays. I'm thinking about True Lies. What kind of a taste stills the ice cube trays? We'll get to that eventually. So, final thoughts on this film. I had a question, and because I couldn't actually verify it, but I think this might be the first blue skybeam that we've seen in modern film.
I have no idea.
Pre-Avengers, Man of Steel, pre all those. I don't know. Someone, maybe one of our listeners can research and get back to us on that. But I was like, hey, it's a skybeam, because that's always a joke now. And it's like, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin were responsible for that, because they've influenced a lot of things. But it just kind of struck me as odd. I do want to mention that I love the fact that the president, not only does he give that great speech, then he jumps in a fighter plane and leads the attack.
Yeah.
And I'm getting chills just thinking about that right now, because it's like, that is so macho.
Yeah.
What a great move to have that happen. He's like, of course, I belong in the air. It's like,
yeah, you do. Move.
Oh man, it's so great. What a great moment. And you're like, yeah, of course he is. And then, Russell Case figured out how to fly a fighter plane in, an hour. He's
just
good.
Like Dustin Crops, kid.
Apparently it is like Dustin Crops. It's not flying through hyperspace, but flying into an alien spacecraft, pretty much like Dustin Crops.
Holdo maneuver.
It's
all foreshadowing.
Oh my gosh. Dude, that's absolutely right. What a beautiful connection. The worldwide montage at the end, little cheesy.
Sure.
But it worked at the time. I didn't notice it was cheesy then. It's a little, and that's one of those things too. I'm just like, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm an American. I live in America. I know we have listeners outside, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for listening to us. I know we have somebody in Hong Kong that's listening to us on a regular basis. Over in Europe, there's somebody in Ireland and some people in Germany and all over, which is fantastic. And so I'm curious, like, what their views on this film are. Are we, as egocentric as we can be as Americans, thinking like this is a great film because America, like how do they view the film? I wonder. And in '96 versus now, like, are there different opinions because it happens to be, an American film where Americans, come up with the plan and save the day. So that's, again, you said this movie's ripe for now. So there's lots of things we could do way deeper.
Yeah.
But we don't have time for that today.
Well, just one last thing, because I do think, we do have international listeners, and it's awesome that you guys are listening out there. We'd love to hear from you about what you think if you've seen this movie. My gut is that they would say that, yes, we are egocentric Americans, which is probably totally justified, but it's also still a really good film. And what makes me think that is the movie Dunkirk, which is kind of the British-centric, heroic movie. Look how amazing and heroic all these British people are. But I can acknowledge that and be like, yeah, it's still a really good movie, though. I still enjoy it. So I am curious, though, what other people think. And I think that's also, kind of viewing this movie from the future a little bit. Like, we're looking back and going, yeah, it's a little, America-centric and like focused on America, even though it's preaching unity, and, it is what it is. And it's still a really fun movie, in my opinion. And it doesn't, I don't think it detracts from the fun of the film. And if that's, I wouldn't say that, watching Independence Day is how you should gain your philosophy on life. But if you're looking for a fun film to watch on a Friday, I think it really fits the bill.
I would agree. And I love that you brought up Dunkirk. I just recently watched that with my son. He's 13 and loved it. And it really has very little to do about where it's set and who, what country they're representing, as much as it is, how good the film is. And I think that we've demonstrated that this film is, it's a good film. It's a fun film, and it does what it's supposed to do. And I don't know what more you can ask from a film.
I don't think you can ask any more. So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook, or you can email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com.
And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast catcher. We'd love to hear your feedback, and it really helps us get the word out about the podcast. And if you haven't yet, please join our Facebook group. It's a safe place to share your thoughts and discuss all things related to movies.